Tens of thousands of carers have now left the industry, and experts are saying we are in an absolute crisis. Their words, not mine. Apparently, there's nearly 200,000 jobs to fill, and England alone is expected to need about 500,000 more care staff by 2035. Kevin, it gets me pondering all of this. When you look at carers, a lot of them earn minimum wage, a lot of them travel from job to job and don't get paid for the travelling time in between. And I kind of think, do you think we value caring as a profession, carers?
We don't. I mean, I've worked with the care sector and care companies for many years. I've used care for my parents. We don't. The answer of it is money. I'm afraid. They're undervalued, they're underpaid. Councils, who've been subject to a decade plus of funding reductions, provide a lot of care. They're struggling for money. And many private providers, not all, but some, don't look after their staff well enough. It's an undervalued profession. I've thought for years we should have something like a national care service similar to the NHS and elevate this profession to make it...
What would that look like?
Well, it would just look like Royal College-style recognition for carers, increased starting salaries and a greater appreciation of care as a career that you could go into to achieve your life goals and ambitions, as well as doing something very purposeful.
I quite like that idea. Do you like that idea? Is it a good one? Would it fly?
Actually, I do. I think it's sort of started off as a bit of a hodgepodge type of job to go into. Because, as I said earlier, if you're going back, 2 or 3 generations, and you still see it on the continent, I think, certainly more than here, if you had older parents, they'd often live with the rest of the family. And then, of course, we became mobile, and then you found the kids then moved off and went around the country for a different job. And then you found more and more older people and then going into retirement and then becoming probably maybe a little bit frail or whatever, finding it difficult to stay in their own home. So I think it's just society has changed hugely. So I think it's sort of managed OK. And then the care homes were set up. I mean, about 85% of the care homes are private. And then the rest of them are run by the local authorities. And so in terms of the sort of pay and conditions, I think it's sort of been left on a bit of an ad hoc basis rather than anything structured. Now, I'm not saying that there should be a national structure in place because, I don't think you need to do anything like that. But I think if you start with where the care homes are, I think they should be paying a proper wage. I think the conditions should be good. And you do get a lot of people. And they do stay and they'll work in that care home for many years. I've visited care homes. I mean, don't forget, I was a member of the European Parliament for years, so I went down around different ones in the northwest. And I have to say, some of them were absolutely fabulous, but they cost a lot of money. And then I'm thinking, well, you're charging the client, thousands a week, and you seem to be paying the staff very little. So I think that, that's certainly a consideration. I think where also some of the shortfalls come in, unfortunately, again, and I don't want to harp back, but it happened, but a decision was made about mandatory vaccination for care workers during COVID. I mean, it stopped being progressed onto NHS workers because we'd have been in a real problem. And I never, ever agreed with that, frankly. And we obviously found out since, and we knew at the time, that even if you were vaccinated, you could still contract or you could still actually pass on this virus. And I don't think the care workers were lax in any event. And there were certainly people who weren't able to have that vaccine and they lost their jobs. Now, the trouble is you then had a whole chunk of people who were taken out of the market. So even when things calmed down and we started to get people back, people then found different jobs. So we would have lost some really experienced care workers. The ones that roam around, as we know, they go to 25 minutes for somebody's house and 45. It happened with my mum, who was in social care. Again, they're generally local authority care workers. Now, I accept, local authorities can be stretched, but they waste an awful lot of money. And they've all been given extra funds over the years in terms for social care. Oh, they have by central government. They certainly have. And so I'm not saying that they wouldn't like more at all, but there really is no excuse then to keep the wage levels so low because they're still paying in the local authority homes, people are still paying towards it, that people feel as though that they have to leave?
I mean, I would have to disagree with you that funding cuts to local authorities are not linked to falling care standards. And whilst local authorities directly might only provide about 15%, they in many cases set the fees and then subcontract to the providers.
Oh, I agree.
And so, you know, there is an issue with money, and that really is what it's going to take. And just if we could try and move forward and get political consensus, because viewers and listeners might remember when at the tail end of the last Labour government, radical plans came forward to try and fix this. Because the Conservative Party were in attack mode, a bit like you said Labour were earlier, it got called Labour's death tax. Now, actually, we're going to have a grown-up debate about care in this country because, you know, I think our personal experience and our viewers and listeners is it's not working. This really important report today says we've got a huge issue.
Yeah, one of the challenges is, like you're pointing out, wasn't it a dementia tax or something that May tried to introduce, and she got a criticism for it. One of the challenges is we all concede that social care perhaps is broken to some extent. And then when there does seem to be the sense of, right, put your hands in your pockets then to pay for it, then there does seem to be a bit of resistance. But to Jacqueline's point about the vaccine mandates, tens of thousands of people were booted out of their jobs for not having those vaccines. I personally would say that if you were one of them and you want your job back, some of them won't want their job back, but if you did, I think they should be rehired.
Absolutely.
Well, I would, there's a debate to be had around that, but I would also like us to talk about the fact that I'm afraid there were mistakes made where people were sent back into care homes.
Yeah, but hang on, come back to the question that I'm posing. The vaccine mandates, if you were kicked out of your care profession and you want to come back, don't you think they should be allowed back in?
Yes, for sure, because I think we're at a different phase of COVID. But the whole issue around what happened about care workers and vaccinations, I would suggest is not the answer to the bigger question about
I think
care.
it's a contributing factor, and the thing is, this widens out, if I may say, because this is why they're trying to... The NHS and care are hot political footballs, and we know that. And where we would agree, whichever side of the political spectrum, and I have said it for years along with others, unless we get this out of the political mode and we can sit down and have a conversation cross-party with everybody and say, how do we need to operationally... I mean, the NHS doesn't have a problem because of money. Most of these problems are not always money. It's the structure, it's the... the thing is... The committees that are involved, all of these things, so many things make it so complex to deliver what we need to do.
Well, Helen's been in touch, and I am a domiciliary carer in the Cheltenham area. She says, I love my job and my clients. I get paid just above minimum wage. I get paid mileage that pays for some of the fuel in my car, but not all of it. I don't get paid for the time between clients either. She's basically saying that it is just kind of getting out of hands, I think. She's saying that councils are not paying care companies enough. She worries that going forward, care companies perhaps will only start accepting private clients, which is, of course, a worry for many. Archie says, I was a carer for 3 family members, one in a wheelchair, one with cancer and dementia, and a third with motor neuron disease. He says that took 30 years out of my working life. Now he has to struggle on by with restricted benefits. And I think a lot of people are in that situation where they are struggling with caring for family members as well as trying to keep a roof over their own heads. It is not an easy situation for many.
I agree with that.
And this is a conversation I think that perhaps will rumble on. But for now, Jacqueline and Kevin, thank you very much for your time, and thank you for your thoughts at home as well.